Hi guys, good morning. Can all of you hear me? Fine, great, thanks. Okay, well, I hope all of us are in the right class. This is Financial Management, English Medium. Well, welcome to the new norm, right? To tell you about this subject, but before that, let's talk about what is going on in the country. This is something very new to all of us. Doing online classes with no students, speaking to a mic, to a camera, to a mic, and going online is something new to all of us, right? It's new to you, new to me, but we may have to live with this for some time. Hopefully things will settle down very fast, sooner rather than later, and hopefully one day we will get to meet. And unfortunately, right now, this will have to be the case where you listen to me online. So I can still take questions. If you all have questions, just post it on chat. Or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. A few ground rules. Please mute all of your mics. And if you have a question, you may unmute. Ask the question and mute once again. Yeah. Well, all right, I'll tell you about the subject initially. Financial management has been the nemesis for many students over the last several exams, right? Pass rates are around 30%, maybe less, which means out of, if 10 of you sit for the exam, only 3 will get through. It also means that I will meet 7 of you 6 months down the line, which is very unfortunate, but that has been a fact. Right now, why do students fail? Well, I'm clueless, because this is one of the easiest exams you all are going to do during your lifetime. Right? After grade 5 scholarship, this will be the easiest. Trust me. So you don't have to do a lot of work. All you have to do is just pay attention and go through whatever notes we do. And that's more than enough for you all to get through. But as I said, pass rates have been very poor, right? No one knows why, but unfortunately, but hopefully it will get better with you all. All of you will hopefully pass. It's very easy to pass. This is an exam which is very, very difficult to fail. Right? If you want to fail, you'll have to try extremely hard. So it's one of the most easiest exams you're going to do in your lifetime. All you have to do is just enjoy the exam. As for the subject matter, there might not be anything new, right? It's something you already know. It's just a matter of articulating things and putting pieces together, and then you're there. Right. So my job is to guide you all through. I will give you some exam tips, but hopefully by then we will meet physically. It's all about how you tackle the exam. Now, pass mark for this exam, like all other exams in the banking examination, is 45. So all you have to do is score 45 marks. Now the thing is, if you sit for 3 hours and wait, 45 is nothing, right? The other thing, most important thing is, as students, you all will have to put some effort to get through. Right? So by effort, what I mean is you will have to go through what we do in class, which is not difficult. It's not rocket science. We are not doing brain surgery. Just very simple, basic, elementary theory. Right? Nothing complicated. Very, very simple. Right. So all you have to do is just go through the notes, and also read as much as you can. Read not only the subject matter, but anything that you come across, right? Anything related to the economy, because that will definitely get tested at the exam. It comes not as in one-to-one testing from what is published in the newspaper in your exam paper, but the wordings that come in some of the articles are very important. So if you know these already beforehand, then you're through. It's as simple as that, right? So 50% of the exam can be won simply by just reading, pure reading. So read all the business news, anything that you come across. Go through BBC, Economy Next, Lanka Business Online, Financial Times. That is an absolute must. Right? If you do that, that's all you have to do to pass. The other benefit is you also learn a lot when you read these magazines. Read also analysts' recommendations, whatever that you come across, anything related to the economy. Right. So all you have to do is just read that and you're through, guaranteed. So that is 50% of the exam, reading, knowing what is going on around you. Right now, for example, if you come across, if you read articles, you might come across terms like derivatives, hedging. So all these are bonds. Now, of course, Sri Lankans, everyone knows about bonds. Right? So it's very simple. Now, but going back to the current situation in the country, right? Now, 6 months ago, say around last December, if anyone had told you that we will be locked down, Sri Lanka will be locked down, the entire world will be locked down, people would have laughed it off. No one would have believed. But that has become a reality today. And until December last year, Contagion was only a movie. But now it is very much reality. Right? So the world is very dynamic. Things keep changing. Things never stay the same. So dynamic that you just can't be static. You also have to move with the world, isn't it? Right. And the efforts that all of you are putting in is excellent. Rather than just staying at home, doing nothing at home, you all are determined to learn something new, to continue with your studies, even under these circumstances, which is very good. This is exactly what you need to do, right? You have 2 months where most of you are staying at home, working from home, so you have lots of time to spare. So after 2 months, when you go back, you have to upskill yourself, right? Don't downskill. Don't take a break. This is the time where you need to recharge your batteries. You need to get better. You have to go back to office a better person, not the same person that you were 2 months ago. So this is an opportunity for you. You have to make maximum use of this opportunity. The best way to do is to read and read. Right? Read as much as possible. Read the latest business news. Get in touch with markets. Right. So COVID-19. Look at the economic impact. Now, ADB forecast an $8.8 trillion loss to the world. 8.8 trillion. That's huge. So it's bigger than the financial crisis in 2008, bigger than the subprime mortgage crisis. Unbelievable chaos. Now, the beauty is, or the amazing thing is, all this was caused by something which cannot be seen by the naked eye, isn't it? By a virus, right? So it's the unseen enemy that's causing all this havoc around the world. But then again, look at how many businesses are struggling as a result. Right? Everyone is struggling, isn't it? Now, even Virgin Airlines has filed for bankruptcy in Australia. Then in the UK, they are not flying to certain destinations, right? They are not doing Gatwick. This is unprecedented. Never happened before in the world, but it has happened. So how many of us are ready for such a pandemic, such an economic crisis? Also look at, there's some talk that Victoria's Secrets might go bankrupt, which is almost unbelievable, isn't it? So no one is too big to fail. 2008, Lehman Brothers went bust. Now, that was a real shock to the entire world, right? The last thing you would expect is a company like Lehman Brothers to go bankrupt. but it happened. Also, with the current crisis, we have seen the local stock market falling by 30%. Right. So meaning if you had invested $100 in the stock market, in the Colombo Stock Exchange, by now you would have lost a good 30 rupees. So you're left with only 70 or 30% in the red. Investors have taken a beating, a hammering. And with that, all the foreign investors are exiting the country. Most of the foreign funds have exited, right, which has put a lot of pressure on the exchange rate. It went up to about 192, even higher than that, around 196, if I'm not mistaken. But now it's settling down once again. And that's after there were suspensions on imports and all of that. So it's a matter of how well we face this situation. It's a crisis. Are we geared to face such a crisis? Also take some of the manufacturers like Ferrari, for example. Ferrari, well, is doing something they would never have even dreamt of even 6 months ago, right? This Italian car manufacturer, the luxury sports car manufacturer, is now manufacturing ventilators. Never heard of before. Louis Vuitton is doing face masks, right? Unbelievable, isn't it? In a way, it's good, right? These guys are somehow staying in business, isn't it? No, they are not lamenting about the poor state of the economy, that things have come to a halt. No, they moved from manufacturing, Ferrari moved from manufacturing luxury sports cars into ventilators, right? So it's how flexible and nimble you are to make use of a situation. You come out on top during a crisis means you're really strong. Right? When the tide is in your favor, you will do extremely well. The challenge is when the tide is against you. How do you face these challenges? Yes. Now, locally also, we have seen lots of companies going into lots of problems. Their sales have dropped. Some of the garment factories had to close down. Their orders were cancelled. Future orders were also cancelled. So some of them announced steep job cuts and pay cuts. Right? Some of the big conglomerates in the country also announced pay cuts. Now, this is very unfortunate. Right? In my perspective, because most companies talk so much about their employees, and no sooner a crisis hit, the first thing they did was to cut pay salaries, which is not really good. And it's also when there is so much of negativity around you, that is not the best thing to do. In fact, they should have done the opposite. They should have maybe even increased their salaries. And some companies have gone into the extent of increasing or giving additional benefits to their employees. Fantastic, fantastic initiative. And that's what a real strong leader should do. Go and drive and motivate your staff. If a company stands for their staff, when the chips are down, guaranteed employees will rally around it and do a lot of good. Right? They will stick with the company, they'll be loyal, and they will do wonders to you. So what they could have done is motivated the staff. And also, now the economy is slowing down. Now we are expecting recession, global recession as well as recession in Sri Lanka. So what could have been done rather than cutting salaries was to give a spike, right, to consumer demand. Consumer demand. There should have been a spike actually. Right? That can only be done by giving additional benefits to employees. Now, the central bank has done the right thing by printing money. So they are trying to increase demand, right, consumption by increasing the money supply in the economy. Now, when that is done, some people even talk about helicopter money. Right? That means instead of central bank printing money, you just add a zero to your account balance, right? Zero at the end to your account. If your account balance is anyway zero, it doesn't make any sense. But if you had some money and you add a zero, it multiplies the money supply in the economy by 10. right? So that will naturally give a spike to consumption. Right. So there would have been a boost to consumption if that had been done. So printing money at this point is a fantastic idea. All the central banks in the world, even the US, is printing money. Now, this happened way back in 2008 also. The Federal Reserve, the US central bank, went on a money printing spree. Right. So that was good because part of that money, now at that time, because money supply in the US was very high, interest rates started dropping in the US. Right. So there was hot money flowing out of the US into emerging markets. Right? So emerging markets like Sri Lanka, Mongolia, and all these countries benefited. Right? All those funds, the printed money in the US started coming into stocks and bonds of these countries. So they also did well. There was global growth that happened, a boost in the global economy. GDP started growing. All countries were doing well. But with the crisis, all that money had to exit. Yeah, some funds were brave enough to take losses and exit at any cost. Now, for us, it is a matter of bringing these guys back. Sending them out is very easy. Now it's the challenge of bringing them back. Now, if you all were following global markets, you may have noticed that the Sri Lankan sovereign bond is trading at, well, about 2 weeks ago, it was trading at a rate of 50%, right? Now, the sovereign bond is a Sri Lankan bond issued in dollars, right? Traditionally, central bank will issue bonds in rupees, but in the case of a sovereign bond, it was issued in dollars, not in rupees. Now, had this bond been issued in rupees, if the central bank had no money to settle, they would have simply printed money and settled. So there is no risk of default. And default is not even issued if it was issued in rupees. But if it is issued in dollars, then it has to be settled in dollars because Sri Lanka cannot print dollars. So Sri Lankan central bank now has a problem. If rates remained at 50%, how are we going to refinance these dollar bonds? Because we have about $15 billion dollar bonds outstanding. And so we have raised around 15 billion in dollars through sovereign bonds. So those bonds will have to be settled to investors when they mature. Also, coupon interest will have to be paid. So every year we have to pay coupon, and debt service cost is about $5 billion every year. And our reserves, Sri Lanka's reserves, is around $7 billion. Right? Last time it was about $7.2 billion, which is enough to settle only about 1.5 years of foreign debt, external debt. But then again, we can't do that because we've been running a trade deficit. Right, balance of payments have been marginally surplus, sometimes even negative. So we cannot afford. So even the trade deficit have to be funded through our reserves. Right now, this year, well, the trade deficit had to be funded with reserves, and these reserves also boosted from foreign remittances. Now look at this year. What has happened this year? Foreign remittances will dry up, right? Because the Middle Eastern countries are facing a crisis, isn't it? Oil prices are down. They are also locked down with corona and all that. Oil prices went to negative oil prices. That means if we buy crude oil, instead of us paying the seller, they will pay us. Right? That's because there was an oversupply in crude oil in the market. So no one wants crude oil, but there is huge amount of supplies, excess supplies in the market, which there is nothing to do about. So that will cost you storage cost. And instead of paying storage, you just pay something additional to the buyer and give it away. That is also cheaper than storing it. And so crude oil went to negative. Right? Interest rates have gone to negative interest rates, meaning if you deposit money in a bank, you will be charged. Instead of the bank paying you interest, you will have to pay the bank. Right? So something that has never been seen in the world. Negative prices. US interest rates, the 10-year US bond has fallen to all-time low levels. Yeah, so it's unprecedented times. So there's a Middle East crisis. Then look at our exports. Government exports. We are exporting currently just PPE, personal protective equipment, right? All the brands that we used to export to Victoria's Secrets and Gap and all that have dropped. The orders have been cancelled, and the garment sector is in turmoil. Then all the other exports are also dropping, and just the tea industry is doing well, but they also have their own challenges, right? The packaging and printing has become a challenge. So it's interesting times, also challenging times. So this is a matter of survival of the fittest. Now look at the various industries. Look at, for example, the leisure sector, hotels. Well, pretty bad. They're on a tough wicket, green pitch. No visitors. Hotels are closed. Huge overhead costs to be paid. You never know. Tough times for them. Then the airline industry, as I mentioned earlier, Virgin has filed for bankruptcy. Virgin, right now, Richard Branson is running Virgin, but his airline is bankrupt. Now, Richard Branson is one of the top, in the first top 50 richest persons in the world, and his airline is going bankrupt. Now, why can't this guy pump money and keep his airline going? That's not the case. Right? Now, Richard Branson will say that that is his own money now. Right? And he will ask the government money to keep the airline going. And he will not use his personal funds to keep a publicly listed company going. Also, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, they have announced that they are going to exit 4 airlines. And he has publicly mentioned that it was a big mistake that they entered into the airline industry. They shouldn't have done it here, according to him. It was a mistake. Also in Sri Lanka, so many other industries, companies. Sri Lankan Airlines closed down, and earliest opening date looks like August. Hopefully that will happen, but until then we have to pay our leases, so much of overhead costs to be paid. Now all this, most of it has to be paid in dollars, not in rupees. So that's another burden on our external finances, on our dollar reserves. Right. So now the sovereign rate, Sri Lanka sovereign bond going at a rate of 50% in dollars, right? So now in rupees, you would have noticed that last week the 1-year treasury bill rate was going at 6.92%, 6.92 in rupee terms. In dollars, it is 50%. Now 2 weeks ago, 50%. Now it is down to 30%, which is good, fantastic. But the dangerous thing is about 4 months ago, in February, late February, this interest rate in dollars was about 5 to 6%. It's now up to 50%. It has gone up by 8 times. That's a big jump, huge leap. So with $7 billion of reserves, if we are to finance this position, our dollar external borrowing, if we are to finance, we will have to raise, if we are to go to the international market and raise funds through sovereign bonds, it will cost us 50%, isn't it? Because we'll have to pay that kind of interest rates, which is not sustainable. You can't pay an interest rate of 50% and expect to survive for long. Right? You're going to default. And so our bonds are trading at a huge discount. Okay. Tilainathan. Okay, good question. I'll throw it to the house. I'm not sure whether all of you can see these questions. His question is, when the central bank prints money, will the rupee value depreciate? Yes, okay, your name is Gajan. You go as Gajan. Actually, Gajan, yes, it will have to depreciate. right? Why? Because what happens is when the money supply increases, interest rate will drop, and when interest rates drop, our tendency as Sri Lankans is not to save, not to invest. We consume. When we consume, we import. What we consume is imported now, right? We may start drinking, isn't it? Boozing. Now, booze is imported, right? For example, when you import, not only booze, everything else, even vehicles. When you import, you need to pay in foreign currency. So there'll be a demand for dollars. So when demand for dollar goes up, the local currency will weaken, right? So naturally, the rupee might depreciate. It's likely to depreciate, but that can be avoided if we get foreign direct investments coming in. Right? FDIs, what we call FDIs coming in. When FDIs come in, they will have to be converted into rupees and invested in the local stock market or wherever. That will control the exchange rate depreciation. Right? It will be contained to a certain extent, to a great extent. Right? So one solution is to bring FDIs in. But the other thing is, now at this point of time, currency weakening might not be an issue, because the main concern might be to keep the economy moving. Right? If the economy slows down, if it goes into negative, if we are going into a recession, that will lead to other problems like unemployment. And lots of people will be out of jobs now. Look at the hotel trade. Right? Lots of layoffs. Most of the staff have been made redundant. Then even airlines, Sri Lankan Airlines has cut so much of jobs, so many jobs, 25% I heard, something like that, right? Like some crazy number, 25% of job cuts. The government sector, in some of the permanent, not the permanent, but there are significant job losses, I heard. Also, daily paid workers, huge loss of employment. Now these guys are, they're living by the day, right? Living by the day. So it will lead to lots of social issues. And when there are social issues, it leads to a lot of other costs. Right? You'll have to maintain these guys, lots of expenses for the government, and a huge burden on the economy. So that's what happens when the economy slows down. Right? That's when spending capacity reduces, people don't spend. So manufacturing or the output also reduces, and with that follows job cuts, job losses. So right now, the currency depreciating may not be the problem, right? The challenge is to keep the economy running. To keep the economy running, you have to have cheap credit lines. So that's why all these moratoriums were given. For one reason, most of the companies are struggling, no business or no revenues, right? So top line is weakened. You can't keep servicing your debt. Right? Debt payment becomes secondary, because survival is right now the key. So that's why most of these, the central bank announced so much of debt reliefs packages, and banks were asked to strictly follow this, abide by this very strictly. Right? So it's a matter of enhancing or boosting consumption, giving a spike. As I said, you need to take consumption to a sugar high. Otherwise, the economy will die a natural death. It will slow down. How are you going to recover? Because if the economy keeps growing, right, even if the currency depreciates, if the economy keeps growing, if it keeps growing, if it's running and the economy is growing, everyone is working, have jobs, have money, higher disposable income. If all of us have high disposable income, right? Let's say I was working for a salary of 10,000 rupees, and all of a sudden I lost the job. Then suddenly there is economic growth happening, because the economy is still working, right? So there is no reason for me to be jobless. I will start working, and instead of 10,000, I earn 20,000 or 50,000 or whatever. So I have most money with me to spend, right? What I didn't have earlier, I have now. So I'll start spending, isn't it, on various things. When I start spending, right, maybe earlier my needs were basic, but now I need a car. I might need other things. I might need internet. I might need Wi-Fi. Might need phones, fancy clothes, right? So my demand is going up, it's going through the roof. To cater to my demand, there should be a supply also. For the supply to come, there should be other people also employed, right? So that's how the economy keeps all of us moving. When each of us work, we earn more and more. lots of other people benefit. But the other thing is, now when we earn, and if you go and put money in a bank, that's not going to help the economy. We need to either spend it, consume, or invest. Both are equally good. Because if we invest, then someone else who can use the money efficiently will take the money and run with it, right? That will help the economy. Lots of other jobs will be created. Output will increase. Quality of life will increase. If I spend, again, my income will be distributed amongst so many. So that also keeps the economy running. That is why it's important to, at a time like this, at a crisis situation, to keep the economy going. Right? You can't let it slow down. You can't let it crash. You need to keep it going at any cost. So that's the right move that the central bank has made, to keep interest rates low and keep the economy going and growing. Right? If the economy, Sri Lankan economy, is doing well domestically, right? Now this will attract foreign investments also. They will start putting money where put their money where their mouth is. Right? They will put all their money in a country which is growing, likely to grow. Then the return on investments also will increase. Now, we mentioned that the US is on a money printing spree. They are going to print about some $4 trillion. Part of this money we need to attract, right? That's a must. As a country, we need to attract this, because we can't give the benefit purely to the US. We need to get that money in and leverage on it. And we need to grow. Huge opportunity for Sri Lanka. So this is not the end of the road. This is only the beginning. We can leverage. We can become a better nation with this money. Right? It's a chance for us to grow as a country. Yeah. So I hope I answered your question, Gajan. Right. So likewise, good question. You all are free to ask questions anytime you want. I'm happy to take questions. All right. Okay, so let's get on with the subject matter. Okay, let me see how I can share my presentation with you all. Can you guys see the PowerPoint? Okay, all right. You can see the PowerPoint, right? Okay, let me pull it out. Yeah, so this is financial management. We will skip some of these slides. Now, the other thing is this subject has a little bit of mathematics, right? Mathematics, and the deepest we will go is grade 5 mathematics. What you did for grade 5 scholarship. Yeah, so it will not get any difficult than that, right? So if you know grade 5, then this is a piece of cake. So all you need is grade 5 knowledge. Don't need to know beyond that. You don't need integration, differentiation, no need. Just grade 5. Okay, plus, minus. If you know that, that's it. And you need to use a calculator, right? Use a calculator. Start using a calculator. Don't use a traditional calculator. You need to use either scientific or a financial calculator. Don't use your phone. Right? The phone is not going to help you. So what you need to do is start working on your calculator straight away. From now until you take your exam, your calculator is going to be your best friend. Right? You have to go to bed with your calculator, literally. You need to start practicing. Don't go to the exam and start practicing the calculator. Do it now itself. So it's all about upskilling yourself, right? And if I may ask why each of you joined this class, the answer is to learn something new. Well, why did you all join the class? What is your objective? Maybe you all can type some answers. Lolita, why did you join the class? What is your objective? You should have only one objective. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Now your objective has to be passing the exam. Fantastic. Okay, we are on the same page. In that case, your objective is to pass the exam. My job is to get you through the exam. Right? So you can't be going in one direction and I can't be going in another direction. All of us have to move in the same direction. Otherwise, this is not going to work. So it's good that our objectives are aligned. We need to pass the exam, right? So if you came here to gain knowledge, then you may be in the wrong class. You're here just to pass the exam. If you want knowledge, you'll have to learn separately on your own. Yeah. All right. Very good. So our goal is clear. We have a very clear objective of getting through the exam, right? And whatever happens, whether it's COVID-19 or anything, you need to get through, right? So nothing is going to keep you back, and you need to make sure that you complete financial management and banking by at the next session, right? Hopefully in September. So by September this year, you need to complete banking, not just financial management, complete banking. Because as I said, banking is the easiest exam you're going to do during your lifetime. Right? So don't become a fixed asset to the institute. You need to complete banking this year. Right? So my advice is to take all 6 or 7 subjects in one go. Don't do 2 or 3 at once. Do all 6 or 7 in one go. Right? It's easy. See, O-level you did 8 subjects anyway. Now this is easier than O-level. Right? So do all 7 together. A-levels you did 4 subjects or 3 subjects. Right? So do all 6 or 7 subjects together. It's easy. Believe me, it is easy. Right. Let me find the PowerPoint once again. Can you all see the PowerPoint now? I can't. All right. Okay. Let me find it. How about now? Can you all see the PowerPoint? Oh, good. So, all right. Okay. Right. So today we'll be doing an introduction. Right. This is what we are going to cover during the next session, meaning the next 6 months. Right. So don't panic. These are high-level names, but what they mean is very simple. How many of you have heard of dihydrogen monoxide? Dihydrogen monoxide. It is an element, not an element, but it is a it's something which causes. Yes, your answer is right. Right. So dihydrogen monoxide, technically very difficult, but it means water. So some of the terms that you come across in this are going to sound the same. It will sound high level, but it means something very easy, right? So no need to panic. Don't panic. That is why I want you all to read. Right? When you read, you come across these words. So it will not be something new. Right? It will not hit you by surprise. It will not be a surprise. So please start reading from today itself. You have so much of time at your hands. You need to start reading every day. Read for half an hour. Well, I can show you. I can demonstrate. Right? Take another minute or two. It's worth it. Look, on my phone, I have BBC. Yeah. So every day, this is the first thing I do when I wake up. I read BBC. So much of news. Then they have a separate area for business news. You can read anything you want on BBC. It's see, Renault is starting jobs. Simple app. Just download and read. Kylie Jenner has dropped from the billionaires list. Then also you need to read Economy Next. Please read this. Okay. Right, so that's your assignment for next week. Start reading. Read half an hour, just half an hour every day, maybe even 10 minutes at least if you can. Read one article every day. Simple, no? But this will get you through the exam, right? That could be the difference between a pass and a fail. 5 minutes that you spend every day reading something new, business news, is a must. Right? So you need to have the discipline. This exam is all about discipline. Right. So why I need you to read is so that most of the terms you come across will not be anything new. But the other thing is, I will not be. This is an open-ended exam, right? Sky is the limit. So the examiner has a habit of testing something new at every exam. But it will be something that you have heard of if you have read. Right? If you can manage to score a few marks for that question, the bold from the blue, if you can write a few points and score a few marks, that will be the difference between a pass and a fail. Very easy to pass this exam, believe me. Right. So what drives markets? What are the factors that drive markets? What we discussed today, political stability, how stable is an economy. Now, take for example, if you are given a choice between investing in the US, right, and investing in a country like Afghanistan or Iraq, where will you invest? Yeah, you will not invest in Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan. Why? They are not politically stable, right? So if you're an investor, you need to have political stability. Legal and regulatory factors. Now, if legal and regulatory framework is changing every day, right? It's very dynamic, more dynamic than the market. Then it's tough to take decisions, right? So you need to have stability in these legal and regulatory frameworks. Economic factors like exchange rates, interest rates, unemployment, GDP, commodity prices, very important. Now, exchange rate. Sri Lanka's exchange rate went to a record high. So if you were an importer, you would have got hammered, but exporters will benefit. Right? So the same exchange rate will have different impacts depending on how we are positioned. Now, interest rates, if you are a borrower and interest rates are going down, you will benefit. But if you are an investor, and if you have surplus cash and interest rates are going down, then you will lose, isn't it? The other thing is when interest rates drop, you might start looking at alternative investments. Maybe you might invest in stocks. Right? The Sri Lankan stock market, incidentally, just before lockdown, fell by about 30%. It recovered to a certain extent. Again, it is a little stagnant. Markets are a little bit jittery these days over the last week. So a little bit of uncertainty has crept in once again. And on top of that, we had ratings being Sri Lanka's ratings being downgraded by Fitch, then by S&P. Right, so things look a little grim, but in actual fact, it may not be the case. Right? You and I don't feel it yet. Well, we are at B minus. Sri Lanka is at a B minus rating, which is below B minus, you get to CCC, which is pretty bad. The monetary and fiscal policy. Now, monetary policy is decided by the central bank. That's where they decide on the SDF, SLF, and the reserve rate. Also, they will decide on the bank rate. Right now, bank rate was not touched for some time, but now it has been reduced to, well, latest is 9.5%. Now it used to be 15% from long time back. It was 15%, but recently central bank brought it down to 3% above SLF, right? So it was brought down to 10% initially, and later, about 2 or 3 weeks back, central bank cut rates once again, and along with that, they brought down the bank rate also. So the bank rate is something that a bank which is desperately in need of funds can use. Now it is going at 9.5%. It is a clean facility which banks can enjoy. So fiscal policy is something that the Treasury will look after. It means the government's budget, right? With the revenues minus expenses of a government. The fiscal balance or the budget balance of a government. Now, Sri Lanka has eternally run budget deficits. We have hardly had a budget surplus. So having a budget deficit is not bad actually. However, what it means is we are borrowing from future generations. Right? So we need to put that money into good use. And then stock market returns. You will also look at stock market returns. What is happening in the stock market, the equity market? Geopolitical factors means what is going on around you in the world. What is the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve doing? Argentina defaulted on debt. So will that have an implication on Sri Lanka? Things like that. The liquidity in the market. Now, central bank pumped 150 billion rupees into the market. That's almost $1 billion. And so they pumped it in rupees. They had printed money in fact. So at a time like this, under normal circumstances, if there was no COVID, nothing, that may not have been the best thing to do. But under these circumstances, it's a fantastic move. They are trying to give the economy a boost. So hopefully it's now up to corporates and to banks to pass it on to the economy, right? They cannot benefit on their own. They have to pass down the economic benefits to the entire country. Otherwise, the country is going to be in pretty bad shape. So corporate finance deals with how companies manage their funds, right? It also handles taxes, tax planning, project planning, and all that. Right. So treasury. What is a treasury of a bank? It's the heart of a bank. It can make or break a bank. You know, when you talk about breaking a bank, or when you talk about a treasury, this guy is a person you have to talk about, right? You cannot leave, can never leave a guy like this out. And his name is Nick Leeson, right? Nicholas Leeson. Nick Leeson worked for one of the world's 225-year-old investment bank, one of the oldest investment. It was the oldest investment bank in the world. Even the Queen had her money in this bank, Barings Bank, right? This guy, Leeson, was originally from UBS, and he was, I think, at Citibank also. Later joined Barings Bank. He was initially stationed at his the London office. He was doing well, then promoted, and he was transferred out to Indonesia. And in Indonesia also did well and got transferred to head the bank's treasury in the Singapore office. Now, Barings Bank wanted to cut down on cost, so they didn't want to spend on staff. So they got Nick Leeson to perform, to multitask, to multi-hat, right? He was double hatting, not double hatting, triple hatting sometimes. He was performing the duties of the front office, the head of the front office, the head of middle office, and the head of back office. So all duties were on his shoulders. He was handling everything. That's very poor management on the part of Barings. Now, Nick Leeson was not supposed to take any risks, right? But this guy, he wanted to trade aggressively, and he started abusing his powers, right? So what he did, the fraudulent thing he did was he created a bogus account. The account number was 88888, 5 8s, right? Why he created the account was, now whenever he made losses by trading, he makes losses. Those losses were parked in this bogus customer account, the 88888 account, right? His profit he took. So when the customer records a loss, the bank records a profit. So that's how Nick Leeson was accounting for these transactions. Yeah. So this went on for a while, and once he covered up his losses. But then there was a second round, and this time there was no turning back. He couldn't recover his losses, and the losses mounted. So in desperation, what Nick Leeson did was he started doing some aggressive trades. They were called straddles. He started selling straddles. Right now, selling straddles is very risky, extremely risky, because what you're effectively doing, you will learn later, right? Down the line, you will learn this. He started selling a call option and a put option at the same strike price, right? Which is a very risky thing to do, right? If you want to take risk, sell options. That is the deadliest thing you could do. Now, Nick Leeson sold these options expecting the market to be stable. Now, he was betting in the Tokyo Stock Exchange, right? He was trading in the Tokyo Stock Exchange, the Tokyo futures, Nikkei futures they're called, right? In the Nikkei futures. Now, he expected the market to be stable, but it wasn't stable. The reason was there was an earthquake in Japan, and it was called the Kobe earthquake, right? This led to massive losses. Lots of people died, and the market crashed. So Nick Leeson's options got triggered, right? Put options got triggered, and since the market was coming down, everyone started selling these futures to Barings Bank. They didn't have to have the liquidity to settle. So without liquidity, the bank went bust. Now, Nick Leeson was the guy who caused it. Now, what he did was he just wrote a note and said, "I'm sorry," and ran away. And so that's what he did. And Nick Leeson was caught. Now, 3 days after he left the note and ran away, he got caught, was sent to prison, but the bank went bust. And eventually it had to be sold for a price of £1 to ING Bank. Ing Bank bought Barings Bank for a price of £1. Right? Unbelievable, isn't it? And later on, they sold it for a price of $225 million. Right? So they made a huge killing on it. But they had to turn it around. It was a lot of hard work. So Barings Bank, now Nick Leeson ran away, and he got caught, was sent to prison. He was sentenced to 6 years in jail. 6 years in jail for causing the oldest investment bank in the world to collapse, right? And he was released. After 4 years, he got released, got bailed out because he was diagnosed with cancer. So this guy didn't idle in prison, right? So that's why you need to spend this lockdown time effectively. Yeah. Now, fortunately, the country is getting back to normal. So if you had used that time effectively, you started. If you had read a lot, you would have learned a lot. You would have gone back as a new person, upskilled yourself. You could have challenged the top guys with your knowledge. You could have displayed your knowledge. Right. So Nick Leeson wrote a book called The Rogue Trader, and using the proceeds of this book, he managed to buy a football club. So imagine the amount of money he made. Right? He bought the football club, and today he is spinning money because he is doing lectures. Right? Lectures on what? Lectures on risk management. Okay, so Nick Leeson is one of the most sought after speakers on risk management, believe it or not. Yeah, so now life almost came to an end for Nick Leeson, but he came out of it. He came on top of it. And so that is what your determination should be. It should drive you. Never give up. Right? There is never a time where you should give up. Just keep fighting and get better and better. That's the most important thing. Right, so that's the story of Nick Leeson. Now you all need to go through these notes, and at the exam, it's possible that the examiner might test you on some of these. Right, so just that's the story of Nick Leeson. Make sure you go through the notes and you know his story so that you can write at the exam. Now what you need to say is Nick Leeson exceeded authority. There was poor monitoring on the part of Barings Bank. He exceeded his authority and made huge losses, trading losses. And he was acting fraudulently without authority. Right, so Nick Leeson now wrote a book called The Rogue Trader. That book was made into a film. Right, so there's a film called Rogue Trader. So for next week, I want you all to watch this movie. Watch Rogue Trader. Fantastic movie. The story of Nick Leeson. Right. Very interesting. You watch Rogue Trader, then you need to watch a few more movies. Right. So next week, I think there are some holidays also coming up. So you can watch some of these movies. Rogue Trader. Then you can watch Wolf of Wall Street, which most of you, I'm sure, would have watched by now. Then you watch Big Short. Big Short is all about the subprime mortgage crisis. It's a must watch. Also, you can watch The Wizard of Lies. That is Bernard Madoff's story. He ran the largest Ponzi scheme in the world, Bernard Madoff. Watch that also. 4 movies to watch. You have 7 days or 8 days. You can easily watch. Right? 4 movies to watch. Lots of websites to go through also. Do those. Right? Next week you come, you'll see the change, the improvement. Right. So Nick Leeson was not the only guy who became a rogue trader. Now, a trader who deals without authority is called a rogue trader. There were other guys. Jerome Kerwell of Societe Generale. He also performed similar trades. He was not supposed to take huge risk. He was just asked to arbitrage, but he exceeded his authority once again and made losses. Right. So in Kerwell's case, he made, along with profitable trades, he intentionally made loss-making deals also, so that losses will be taken as genuine, so that all the profits he made will be taken as genuine. Now, Jerome Kerber from Society Generale. Again, go through these notes. You need to know about him. Uweku Adeboli is the next guy. From UBS. Adeboli was initially, I think, from Citibank. Then he joined UBS. Again, he exerted his authority. He was found guilty of fraud. Sent to prison. So that's what you need to know. You need to know that these traders exceeded their authority because monitoring by the bank was not up to standard. They was below par. They were eventually the bank made losses, and these traders were sent to prison. That is what you need to know, right? Simple things. Authority was exceeded. There was lack of monitoring from the part of the bank. Losses were made by the bank, and these guys were sent to prison. They cannot practice as bankers again. Then the London whale. It's a trader called Bruno Ixil at JP Morgan. And he was called the London whale. So go through this. All similar stories you will notice. And the bank made losses, and the traders were sent to prison. Right. So treasury in a bank. Right. So there now, because of all these risks, people understood that there should be segregation of duty in a treasury. Front office, middle office, and a back office were formed. Right. The front office is where the transaction originates. It reports to the CEO, MD. Middle office reports to the CRO, and they monitor the risk of transactions. Back office will report to maybe the CFO. They will execute transactions and do the record keeping. Right. So notice that reporting lines of each of the divisions are different, unlike in the case of Nick Leeson. Now, Nick Leeson's case, all three officers reported to him, and he was running the show. And that's not how it should work. Right, so this is a typical front office. Now, all transactions originate at front office, everything. Right, so a guy in middle office can't do a deal, and a guy at back office also is not supposed to do it. Right, it's illegal for them to perform transactions. So all transactions happen at front office, and the front office traders will be hooked on to Bloomberg screens, like what you can see on screen. They will be monitoring all sorts of screens, calling brokers. They'll be on tie lines, and information is the key if you are to be successful at front office. The sooner you get the faster you get information, and the faster you process it, the better you will do. Right, so these, what you can see on screen, are Bloomberg terminals. Right, so all traders are simultaneously looking at so many terminals at the same time. Some might be technical analysts, others might be fundamental analysts, might be combination. So that's why sometimes you see graphs, a lot of news items coming up, data being released. Right, so they will have their eye on each of these. Now, any bank will manage interest rate and exchange rate risk through a treasury. So you need to be abreast of what is going on in markets. If you don't know what is going on in markets, not only in Sri Lanka, but all over the world, then you're going to be in deep trouble, right? That you can't survive. If you don't know what is going on, you can't survive. Now, remember, the dealer trades not like you go to a casino and gamble. That is not trading. Right? It's not gambling. Trading and gambling are two different things. Sometimes you might feel the only difference is these guys are posh and they are seated at office in front of Bloomberg terminals, yet they're gambling. But that is not the case. These traders take calculated risk, right? They need to do so much of analysis, and they have to play within their limits. You can't gamble. So there are so many desks within a treasury. Right? You can have a money desk, interbank desk, derivatives, equity desk, maybe a fixed income desk, customer desk, right, ALM desk. And let's look at what each of these desks will do. Now, money market desk is where the reserve of a bank is managed. Right? Now, all of you have heard of the statutory reserve requirement, SRR, which is 4% currently. Right? So SRR is managed by the front office in the money desk, the money desk of the front office. Right? So reserve is where if a bank gets a deposit of 100, 4 rupees out of the 100 needs to be kept at central bank, right? So every day you need to have a base of balance of 4 at the central bank if you get a deposit of 100. Now on this balance, this balance of 4, you can increase any amount you want. You can go up to 100 if you want, but when you bring it down, you can bring it down up to, if I'm not mistaken, it was revised recently to 90% of, it used to be 90%, it was brought down to 10% or 20%, right? So you can, it's 20%, so you can bring it down to, from 4, 20% is 0.8 now. So any given day, your minimum balance should be 0.8, right? That is if you get a deposit of 100, and the deposit base doesn't change during the reserve cycle. Reserve cycle is from the 1st to 15th of the month, and then from the 16th to the last day of the month. So there are 2 cycles. On average, you should maintain the SRR, right? Right. So let's say first day you had 0.8, next day you had 1, the third day you had 1.5. Likewise, you will add up each of the days reserve balance over the 15-day period. And when you divide each of the total by 15, your average needs to be 4 or above. If your deposit base for that period, average deposit base was 100, right? Sorry, this slide says the SRR was 6%, but it is now 4%. It was reduced recently. It's now 4%, right? Right. So that is the money market desk. Now that is a very important function. Now, what is the purpose of central bank having a reserve? Why would the central bank insist that banks have reserves? It's not in the case of default, right? If a bank defaults, it's not that 4% will be paid to depositors. That will not happen. That is not why this reserve is there. The purpose of reserve is to control money supply in the economy. When central bank increases reserve, so if it's increased from 4% to 5%, right? For a bank, if its deposit base is 100, instead of keeping a balance of 4 in the reserve account, they have to keep now a balance of 5. Not 4, it increases to 5. So the bank's lending position from 96 goes down to 95. Right? So that's the effect of a reserve. So likewise, this happens at each and every bank. So the amount of money circulation in the economy will reduce if the reserve amount reduces. Right? In fact, reserve can also be used to control money supply in the economy. It's called the deposit multiplier. So what happens is, the inverse of 4%, the inverse of the inverse of 4%, or 1 divided by 4%, which is 25 times, is the deposit multiplier. That means if you place a deposit of 100, that deposit can be lent out effectively up to a maximum of 2,500. And that's like the amount of leverage, for example. It's called the deposit multiplier, 25 times. So if the deposit is, the SRR is 10%, that means you have a 10 times deposit multiplier will be 10 times. So the lower the deposit, the lower the reserve SRR, higher the deposit multiplier. If the reserve is brought down to 1%, your deposit multiplier will be 100. Right? So lower the deposit multiplier, lower the SRR, higher the deposit multiplier, and higher the money supply in the economy. Now that's what central bank did. That's why they brought down reserves from 5% to 4% recently. So that the amount of money that is in circulation will increase, and it will lead to a spike in supply, money supply. Okay, so that was in line, very much in line with money printing. Right, so the SRR impact comes from the opening balance in the reserve, then interbank settlements. Now check clearing and all that also goes through the central bank reserve. Right, every bank's reserve will have an impact using inward and outward clearing. Then interbank settlements like money market settlements, bond settlements. foreign exchange settlements, all these happen. Foreign exchange in the local currency will happen through the central bank reserve account. Slip transfers, SEF transfers, cash transfers, all these will also have an impact on the reserve. And then customer RTGS transfers, that also will have an impact on reserve. So an outward RTGS will reduce the central bank reserve of a bank. Inward transfers will increase the reserve of a bank. Now, sometimes you may have noticed that after a given time, certain cutoff time, usually you all will be happy if money is coming into the bank now. You don't care actually. If you are in the branch, you don't care whether it comes in the morning or in the afternoon, for as long as day end if the customer has credited his account, right? But for a treasurer, if money comes after the cutoff time, it's not going to add value. There's nothing he could do with it, right? Say the central bank cutoff is 3 o'clock. So if money comes at 3:05, if he suddenly gets ₹1 billion at 3:05, there is nothing he could do with the money. Right. So that's why it's important that treasurers know the money balance in the morning. First thing in the morning, they should know. The other thing that a money market desk will do is they will manage the nostro accounts. Now, to manage your money balance or the central bank reserve account, you have various tools like you can use repos and reverse repos, right? So repos is where you're short of funds, but you have excess treasury bills or bonds. So what, like, now if you all want to buy a property, for example, personally, if you want to buy a property, you can mortgage the property and buy now. Right? So you pledge the land as security and you purchase against it, right? So if you default, the land can be sold off by the bank, right? So likewise, now land is an asset. Likewise, instead of giving a land, if a bank is short of money, the bank can give treasury bills and bonds. They pledge these as security with a promise to buy it back when the loan matures, and they can borrow against it. It's called a repurchase transaction, repos or reverse repos. Reverse repo is the opposite. If a bank has surplus funds and it doesn't want to lend on a clean basis, it can give security and lend against it, right? That's called reverse repo, repo and reverse repo. So repo and reverse repo will have an impact on your liquid asset ratio. So a treasurer needs to have an eye on the liquid asset ratio. You can't let the liquid asset ratio fall below 20%. Right? So 20% is the central bank stipulated minimum. Now, if your liquid asset ratio falls below 20, you will be penalized. A penalty of ₹1 for every 1,000 rupees per day. Right? So that's effectively 36.5% interest. Your penalty rate is 36.5. Now, on top of the penalty, right, penalty is it's important, but on top of that, what is more important is the reputation. Your reputation, the bank's reputation, will suffer if you are penalized by the central bank, because the entire market will get to know. And so whatever happens in a treasury, the entire market gets to know. There are no secrets in treasury. Transactions, of course, yes, but penalties and all gets around very fast. Right. So those are repos and reverse repos. Then you have another instrument called money, call money. Call money is if you are again short of funds and you don't want to, if the lender is willing to lend without any security on a clean basis, it's called call money. Right. So call money can be used to borrow or lend without security. A clean facility. It's a clean facility between banks. Now remember, repos and reverse repos are against security, whereas call money is a clean facility. And so if you have there is no negative impact on call money if you're borrowing from call money on the liquid asset ratio. It doesn't reduce. Right. Now, the other thing is if you're borrowing from repos or lending using reverse repos, you need to sign what is called a master repurchase agreement. Without a master repurchase agreement, you're not supposed to go ahead with repos and reverse repos. Okay. So remember these points, it can get tested at the exam. Then the interbank desk deals with foreign exchange mainly. Right. The foreign exchange, let's not touch now. We will move on because we are doing foreign exchange in detail later on. Then customer desk, very important desk. Now, most of the banks' money is generated at the customer desk because customers will be doing imports, exports. You might have high net worth individuals who are maybe depositing money, or they're buying bonds from you all. Maybe the customer will want to have want to trade currencies, right? He will want to buy and sell currencies. He will want to switch from one currency to another. He might want to buy currency notes, send remittances out. So this is where you keep your margins. Your foreign exchange margins mostly will come from the customer desk. And some customers will have repos, your fixed income, or the bond desk. Sorry, when you do your when you're dealing with customers, it's important that you have close relationships with customers, right? So literally, you will have to go to bed with your customer if you're on the customer desk. Fixed income securities, that's where you do all your bond and bill transactions, treasury bills, treasury bonds, and if you're doing corporate debt, that is also under the fixed income securities debt. We'll come back later to fixed income securities because it will be covered in detail. We can skip right now. When your ALM desk, right now, this is the bread and butter of banking, right? Bread and butter of banking is you take your deposit and you lend it out. So what happens in between is ALM, asset and liability management. How do you manage in between from taking the deposit to lending it out? In between, what are you going to do? Are you going to take short-term deposits, lend it long-term, or take long-term deposits in short-term? How are you going to structure your base? Is it CASA driven? Do you focus more on fixed deposits, term deposits, right? So that's what you look at in the ALM desk. Very, very important desk. How do you run your mismatches? All that is looked at in the ALM desk. Derivatives. Well, not one of the most highly active desks in the country because derivatives that Sri Lanka uses are minimal and very primary. We don't use the proper derivatives proper. So the derivatives are forwards, futures, options, and swaps. We'll be getting into these later. Very interesting products can be used to the advantage. There are some banks which use these, right? And they make a lot of money on them. You can also lose money. Now that's the dangerous side of derivatives. You can make money, you can save money, you can also lose money. And so in all of these products, that is the case. So that's why treasurers are given the license to make losses. You can make losses. Now, if you're a teller, if you work at the branch, if you work in a counter, if you lose $100, you might have to pocket it out. But treasurers can lose millions of bucks. It is a fact. It is a given that you can, if you're a treasurer, you can lose. But only thing, you can lose money, but it cannot be through negligence. You can't lose through negligence. You can't be negligent. And if you're negligent, if the dealer is negligent, then he can be penalized. But if it's market driven, then it's understood. Daham, your question is, would we be able to refer this video lesson again? It might be getting recorded, I'm not sure. But my guess is probably yes. You need to check with the office, right? I think it might get recorded. Right. So the directions of markets. So markets can be going up, can be going down. If markets are going up, they're going north. They are bullish markets, right? Dovish markets are coming down, and they're going south. So they're also called bull markets, which are going up. Bear markets are going down. Right now, these days, US markets have been rallying. They have been quite bullish. Investors have been quite bullish on US markets. Sri Lankan market last week and the week before were for the last 1.5 weeks were a little dull, mostly bearish. Markets have been coming off a bit. And in this case, the markets I meant was equity markets, stock markets, right? Right. So risk management in a treasury. Now, why is risk management such an important thing in a treasury? Because transaction volumes are huge volumes, right? And so you need to control the level of risk that is being taken in a treasury, right? You can't let dealers run wild like a bull in a china shop. You can't let bulls in a china shop behavior by dealers. So you need to have various limits imposed. Right? You can have dealing room limits, which is the maximum limit that a dealing room can do. If the dealing room wants to do a transaction beyond that limit, they need to get approval from maybe the CEO or the board. Right? Counterparty limits, if you are dealing with other banks, what is the maximum exposure you can have? Dealer limits. Now, the chief dealer might have a higher limit than a very junior dealer. It's depending on the experience and the seniority, limits will differ. Portfolio limits. So if you are running maybe a sovereign bond portfolio, there will be a maximum exposure limit for you all. Stop loss limits. Now you can't have indefinite losses. You can't carry losses indefinitely. At a given point, you'll have to exit. Those are called stop loss limits. Then you need to have your policies in place. Regular audits will have to be happening. Right? So audit can happen maybe once a year, internal as well as external audit. So why is risk management and controls needed in a treasury? Because transaction volumes, as I said earlier, are very massive volumes. Minimum transaction size in a foreign exchange transaction is $1 million. Right, $1 million, and you know how volatile the foreign exchange market is, right? Every second the price keeps changing. So markets are volatile and volumes are huge, massive volumes. So that's why you need to have controls in a treasury, right? If there are no controls, and since volumes are so big, you might have easily another bearings, right? So to avoid that, you need to have your own limits. So these are the various types of limits. You can have risk limits as well as profitability limits. No. Risk limits can be dealer limits, portfolio size limits, per transaction limit, counterparty limits, value at risk limits, all types of limits. Also, profitability limits can be stop loss limits or take profit limits. Stop loss limits is the maximum loss you can take on a transaction. Beyond that, you will have to exit the transaction. Right? There is no point running with hope if the market is unlikely to turn around. Right? Hope will not get you any profit. Then take profit limit also. On the profit, if you're sitting on profits, you can't be sitting on it every day. At a certain point, you will have to exit. That's called take profit limit. And so you can have various control limits, like what I explained earlier, dealing room limit, dealer limit, meaning a dealer-wise limit, intraday limit. Right? Within a certain day, within a given day, you can run up your balances to a certain extent. Now, if you are running a foreign exchange position, for example, and you're only allowed to do well, at the close of business, if you are only allowed to carry a net open position, it's called a net open position of $5 million. Intraday, you might run it up to $10 million, right? Within the day, you might run it up to $10 million at any given time maximum, but by the close, you have to bring it down to $5 million. You can't run your exposures beyond that. That's called an intraday limit. Overnight limit is the maximum amount you are allowed to carry to the next day. Overnight limit. right? So loss limits, like I said, you can have profitability limits. You can limit your profit also, because what happens is sometimes traders carry profits indefinitely. They right, when they are running profits, they continue to sit on the profits, and they don't take profits out of it. But that is also not good, because if you are running profits at a certain point, chances are it might reverse. So it might be a good thing to exit. Beyond a certain point, the profit needs to be taken. Profitability limit, then a dealing room limit. Right, the amount of transactions that can be done by the dealing room is governed by a dealing room limit. Dealer limits, intraday limits, monthly stop loss limits, monthly loss limits. That means intraday, if you are allowed, let's say, for example, to take a loss of $5,000 on a given day, you might have a weekly limit, right? So daily 5,000, weekly it might be $10,000 maximum. Maybe monthly $20,000. You are not allowed. That means you can hit your stop loss limits of $5,000 a day on 4 days, then you're done for the month. You can't do any more trades, right? So if you don't have a stop loss limit, you can't trade for that month. That is done to make sure that you don't keep mounting on your losses. Portfolio limits, you can have asset type limits. So maybe on corporate debt, right? AAA rated securities, you can have a limit of 10 billion rupees, maybe AA plus 8 billion, right? And or you might have a limit on the minimum credit rating, right? You might say investment grade or above. So investment grade, remember, is BBB minus, and above is investment grade. Anything below BBB minus is called junk or non-investment grade. Then you can have asset class wise limits, tenor wise limits. So asset class means corporate debt, maximum exposure you can have, you might say, is 20 billion rupees. Maybe sovereign bonds, you can have maximum of $10 million. Likewise, tenor wise limits, what is the maximum tenor that you are looking at, right? So you might not look beyond 10 years. Okay, so you might have, like, big insurance companies might have the lower limit on tenors. Maybe they might not look beyond anything less than 3 months. Portfolio limits, how do you run mismatches? What is your mismatch between assets and liabilities, right, in terms of maturity and duration? So duration and convexity, those will come back later when we are doing fixed income. Simple terms, remember, the meaning is very simple, although they sound complicated, don't worry. Exposure limit is, if there is default, what is the maximum amount you are going to lose? Value at risk is the maximum loss you will incur at a given confidence level and time period. Value at risk. Counterparty limits, right? Very important. Counterparty limits means for a given counterparty, what is your maximum exposure going to be? Right? They can be in terms of settlement limit. That means what is the maximum size of a transaction you will do with a counterparty? You are not supposed to exceed that limit. Right? So settlement limit is called Herstat limit. Now this happened because there was a bank called Herstat, which went bankrupt. Right now, say Sri Lanka is dealing with a US bank, and if we are buying dollars, right? Okay, well, no, I'll put it this way. Let's say Sri Lanka is dealing, the two Sri Lankan banks are dealing amongst each other, right? Two Sri Lankan banks. Let's say, we'll just take hypothetical examples. Let's say HNB and Commercial Bank, right? Now, if HNB is buying dollars from Commercial Bank, how the transaction will happen is, HNB will give rupees to Commercial Bank, and Commercial Bank will be giving dollars to HNB. Right now, the rupee settlement, look at the time difference, right? Between Sri Lanka and the US. Rupee settlement will happen in Sri Lanka. Dollar settlement will happen in the US during US opening hours. So Sri Lanka is ahead in time now of US. So when HNB does a dollar purchase from commercial, HNB will be giving their rupees in the morning to commercial bank, whereas commercial bank will be transferring the dollars to HNB only after US opens, right? So after HNB gives the rupees to commercial, by any chance, if commercial bank defaults during the day, they go bankrupt during the day, then HNB will not get the dollars, right? That is called Herstat risk or settlement risk. That this risk has really happened with a bank called Herstat. That's why it's called Herstat risk. It's an actual risk. It occurs because of the timing difference between two markets. Yeah. Purely because of the timing difference, right? If you are dealing in foreign exchange, it is a definite risk. Now, if you are dealing in fixed income securities, this will never happen because DVP, there is something called delivery versus payment, DVP, RVP, right? So you will receive cash and you will give the security at the same time. It's a system called DVP, RVP. Sri Lanka, this is not implemented for any other product, only for fixed income securities, right? DVP, RVP. Foreign exchange, it cannot be done because of time difference. Then it can only be done for bonds. It can't be done for any other transaction, right? Even equity, it cannot be done. Sri Lanka is still not geared to do DVP, RVP for equity. Trading limits, right? So you should be within compliance levels and board approved limits, right? You can't exceed both the authority. You're not supposed to do that. And each dealer should be accountable for his transaction. Okay, right. Do you all have any questions up to now? Because I've been going on and on. I hope everything is clear. Right, so no questions can mean two things. Either you understood everything or you understood nothing. Okay. Right, so no questions. In that case, let us move on. I hope so far everything is clear. All right, thanks, Lakshmi. Yeah, right. So trading policy, you need to have a policy on trading, right? And this policy should be read and understood by each and every dealer, because they should trade based on the policy. Now, the policy will be prepared based on a bank's risk appetite. It has to be an iterative process, right? It is not a one-time setup. And you should not tolerate deviations unless there is approval for it. Right, so there should be a daylight net open position. Right, so daylight means the amount of exposure you can carry within a day. Net open position is the day end position that you run. All trades must be within delegated limits. You are not supposed to exceed your limits. Must be communicated in writing. So you need to make sure that all the traders understand the policy. They have read and understood. You should get them to sign off on the policy. Mismatch positions must be contained within the specific limits. If there are mismatches, maybe in terms of maturity mismatches or duration mismatches, has to be within approved limit. If you are exceeding your limit, must be informed promptly. You need to undertake transactions only with the approval of counterparties subject to limits. So transactions should be within your limit framework. Each dealer must ensure profitable use covering surplus or deficit cash balances as projected. So remember, the motive of a dealer is to make profit. So that is his objective. He needs to go after this objective, right, in his best possible ability. They should not enter into deals where the agreed rate is substantially different from market rate. So arm's length transactions should be done at all times. And you can't give out of market prices, right? Your prices should be in line with market. Otherwise, it can be very controversial. Dealers must act prudently at all times, right? You should act in the best interest of your employer at all times. You should be ethical. Then deviation from the above needs specific approvals. Then operational policies. Roles of all parties transacting, processing, recording, checking, and monitoring transactions must be clearly defined and well understood by all parties. List of duties should be complete and clear. Each dealer is responsible and accountable for the positions maintained, properly recorded in the dealer's own position record. At the close of business, compare with the settlement records. All deals must be properly recorded on dealing slips and submitted to the back office with minimum no delay, right? So you can't sit on your transactions, you have to pass it on to middle office and back office immediately. Dispute resolution also is important. It is that's why you need to have policy. So why now ethics? So what is the difference between ethics and something ethical and something legal? Are ethics and legality the same or different? Well, if you all look at it, if you do something that is illegal, right? Let's say you're selling weapons, illegal, it is also not ethical. But if you do something unethical, it may not be illegal, right? Now, for example, what Nick Leeson did, heavy trading beyond his authority was unethical, but it may not be illegal at that time. So everything that is illegal is unethical, but the opposite is not always true. Everything that is unethical may not always be illegal. And why do you need ethics? Because it ensures that there is fair play in the industry. It enhances the reputation of the industry, right? So it keeps the industry going. Also, it can attract and retain the right kind of talent, right? So that's why professions like doctors and engineers attract talent. Everyone wants to become a doctor or an engineer. So, right? So likewise, ethics also creates a level playing field. There are no manipulations. Controls in a treasury, like what we discussed earlier, access control. You need to have access control. Everyone cannot walk into a treasury, and only authorized parties are allowed into a treasury. Dealing and dual authorization, right? So all transactions will have to be dual authorized, like keys in a bank, in the safe. Immediate and authenticated confirmations, right? So confirmations have to be immediate. Reconciliation needs to be done. From brokerage, nostra accounts, revaluations need to be done for accounting. Settlement procedures, you have to have proper settlement procedures. You should be connected to SWIFT, audit, then policies like treasury policy, ALCO policy should be there. Your limits should be in place. You should have a disaster recovery plan and voice recording, right? Voice recording is so that you can resolve conflicts if there are any conflicts within departments. Now, middle office, another very important area. Middle office monitors, they don't do transactions, right? Middle office guys are not allowed to do transactions. They need to stay clear of transactions. It is illegal for a middle office person to go and do transactions. Likewise, it is illegal for middle office people to pass accounting entries. They are not supposed to do that. The middle office monitors risk of transactions done by treasury. That's all they could do. They have only a monitoring or viewing facility. They can only monitor risk, right? Then they need to make sure there is limit adherence, counterparty dealing limits, loss limits. All these limits are adhered to, right? So middle office will set the limits, and they need to make sure that dealers are adhering to these limits. If there are breaches, those breaches should be reported. Now they need to, middle office can perform value at risk, right? So they can calculate and monitor value at risk. In addition, where a middle office can add value risk, they can look at the overall economy. And maybe, for example, look at the COVID-19 situation in the country, and they can advise the dealer to stay clear of certain businesses, certain industries. Maybe if you feel the hotel sector, the trade is not doing well, try and stay clear of investing in hotel sector investments, right? You don't do the debentures, maybe reduce exposure to the hotel sector, right? Maybe don't do hotel sector shares, for example, something like that. Right. So that's the value addition that a middle office can do. Then from time to time, these limits need to be revised. Maybe they might have to be enhanced or even reduced. When the uncertainty is high, perhaps risk should be reduced. Right? When uncertainty is low and confidence is high, you can increase your risk-taking ability, your capacity to take risk. So the middle office is crucial, and they have to be dynamic. It is not a static role. Remember, middle office should facilitate transactions. They should be supportive of front office, and they should add value. Right? Add value in the sense they should be practical and provide value on which sectors to reduce exposure and where you can enhance your exposure. Right? How can you diversify your holdings, your portfolios? That has to be done by middle office. Then the back office executes transactions. All the settlements are done at back office, right? So front office and middle office are not allowed to execute transactions. You can't do those. The front office guy is not supposed to do accounting. You can't pass accounting entries. Record keeping. Traditionally, records have to be maintained for maybe usually about 7 years. At any organization, most organizations, they maintain records for 7 years, unless there are court cases pending. After 7 years, records can be destroyed. So accounting entries are posted at back office. Then they can prepare cash flow statements. They will do the P&L, the balance sheet, and also record keeping. Right. In Nick Leeson's case, is all these were managed by the same person, which is very poor governance. Right. Corporate governance is an absolute must. Right. Now, when you do your P&L and balance sheet, it is also important that you do revaluations properly. So revaluations will have to be done based on market interest rates. And market interest rates, again, can be obtained only from verified sources, valid sources, reputed sources, right? So you can't go to a gossip website and get the exchange rate and all that. That is not done. So if you're getting exchange rates, interest rates, and all that, or equity prices, they have to be from authenticated sites. Right? Without authentication, you can't do it. So, for example, maybe the back office gets figures from the central bank, maybe from Bloomberg or Reuters, or they might check with the stock exchange, closing prices at the stock in the stock exchange, right? So that is the source. That has to be a source. Not from gossip sites. Remember, you can't even take from BBC. Right? BBC is not a gossip site, but you can't do it. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of today's sessions. We still have a few more minutes. So I am most willing to take any questions if you all have any. Right. So today what we discussed was how treasury functions, and it was an introduction to what is to come over the next 3 to 6 months. So I'm not sure how long it will take for us to meet physically. Hopefully it will be sooner rather than later. So now that gradually things are being eased off, my guess is within a month or so, we might be able to meet physically, which is good. We can make sessions more interactive. You all can clarify your doubts. I also can get to see you. That will also add value, right? So any questions from today? So we discussed the front office, middle office, and back office. Remember, front office is where transactions originate. Middle office will monitor the risk, and back office will execute transactions. Right? Remember the rogue traders we did learned about 4 rogue traders. Nick Leeson from Barings Bank, Kweku Adeboli from UBS, Jerome Kerbel, Societe Generale, and London Whale. Bruno Exil was from JP Morgan. Okay, so now these are top-notch banks. Even at top banks, okay, look at Societe Generale, then JP Morgan, UBS. Also, at that time, even Barings Bank was a huge bank, one of the most well-known banks. Now, even recently, there has been cases like this. Now, Tom Hayes, right, a Citibank trader, he got caught to LIBOR manipulation. So that's why LIBOR is now being gradually phased off. Soon it will be taken out and a new benchmark will replace LIBOR. Right? That will take about a year or so, maybe 2 because of this crisis. Okay, so there are rogue traders. On and off you come across. The number of rogue trade cases have reduced, but still exist. And so remember, you need to go home and watch. Well, you probably are at home by now. You can watch Rogue Trader. You can download Rogue Trader from YouTube and watch, or even from a torrent website. Please watch it, right? Now, most of these films I recommended: Rogue Trader, Wolf of Wall Street, The Big Short, and Wizard of Lies. Watch these movies, but only thing is, with most of these movies, every other word starts with F, right? But still worth watching them. They're fantastic movies, very good movies. So you need to watch these. Okay. Well, so if you all don't have questions, maybe we can wrap up for today. Yeah. Okay, so if that is it, I will see you all next week. I think the institute will inform at what time. Might be Sunday, I'm not sure. All right, so thank you very much. All the best. Stay safe. I will see you all next week.